All right, welcome back, everybody. As promised and delivered, Ben, the bait, Golliver, is sitting right here next to me. See, I asked you about that.
Absolutely, we can get all into that, yeah.
Yes, I'm sure we will get into that. But Ben from Blazers Edge, kind enough to join us. Why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself for the three people out there that haven't actually been to the website?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we do a news, rumors, analysis website all about the Portland Trail Blazers, and we try to keep it real focused. There's such a fan base here; it's really obsessive, and so we try to feed that as much as possible. We say our goal is always try to get people fired from their day jobs. We want people clicking the site so much, that they're wasting their boss's resources. So that's kind of what So what we're trying to do. Yeah, we're probably responsible for at least half the unemployment in the city, but we take that, as a source of pride, and really we're just all Blazers all the time, as much as we possibly can, 24/7, 365.
So we'll jump back into the Blazers, but what else do you do in the sporting world?
Well, I write for CBSSports.com, so I cover the NBA just generally. I try to get to every single Blazers home game. I kind of base here out of Portland, and I do a little bit of travel for them as well during the postseason draft situation. So I'll go out to New York next week for the draft, and then go to Vegas for Summer League, obviously, for July, and get a chance to see maybe whoever Blazers pick, and also some of their big names, Anthony Davis, obviously, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. So try to just cover.
The Blazers aren't getting those guys?
No, unfortunately not. No, they're a little bit down that pecking order, unless Neil O'Shea has some real magic up his sleeve. But
he already made one trade with the Hornets, so
yeah, he's got the history, right? Well, you can fleece those guys once, and the Hornets actually made another trade this week. So
I think you can fleece the Hornets multiple times. That's what it looks
like.
They're
running out of stuff to get.
Right.
Yeah, the asset cupboard's getting bare. So just basically, I'm all NBA all the time. It's all
what
I
have
do.
you been doing lately, the last few weeks?
Yeah, well, as soon as the Blazers season ended kind of quickly, I went into a little depression probably for about 2 weeks where I was sitting around my living room like,
that was
what
a
am
quick
I going to do?
Because it seemed to drag out for me.
So it was a kind of depression, and then obviously playoffs started and got into that, and so covered the Eastern Conference Finals. I went back and forth in Miami, got to kind of see the end of the Big Three or Big Four era in Boston, which is obviously a huge story out there. People out here are probably glad to see them go. You got the Kevin Garnett's of the world who just snarled at everybody. But Rondo put on an amazing performance. The Heat did their thing, and then got to see some of the finals as well in Oklahoma City, which it's really fun. I don't know if you guys want to get into this, but people always want to compare Thunder fans and Blazer fans. But I think the single biggest difference is that Blazers fans don't rely on noisemakers. Aside from the little white things that they blow up behind the free throws, which is very limited.
By the way.
Yeah, and they're kind of phallic and kind of strange looking, and yeah. Besides that, it's no artificial noise. In OKC, it's all artificial. They've got these clackers that they're banging constantly. When the Thunder get down in games, they get really nervous and really quiet instead of sort of cheering and rallying the
trying
team
to get them back going on that.
like the Rose Garden crowd does. So I don't think there's any contest. People are trying to say OKC's louder.
You're right. You do feed that crowd.
I don't think there's any contest. I think the Rose Garden is much louder at its loudest than OKC is at its loudest. I think that's how we judge it, right? When you're at your best, when you've got a team that's a really good team, who's the loudest? I think it's Blazers all the way. And I'm normally not a homer. I kind of try to pick on the Blazers a lot. But I think they've got it, man.
I know that Barrett and Rice are often very fond of pointing out how awful the cheering and the noise is in opposing stadiums, and how we kind of have it grown organically here.
Yes, that has to come from the team.
So it's nice that you just confirmed that for everybody watching.
Yes.
That we truly are the best fans.
They're not lying about that. Another thing that they do pick on is the Miami crowd, and that's totally true. I mean, first of all, everyone there is just very much more attractive than the Portland crowd.
Come on,
across the board, right?
So, the bait quota is quite high.
Yeah. So you've got that aspect going, but everyone's just so busy. They have these like bars and almost like outdoor, almost like beer cocktail mixers that they have going on at the stadium. So that's why nobody's in their seat early, because they're all, going to like learn how to procreate before the game. So then they finally make it into the game about, 2 minutes or so before tip off, and then they're very quiet and they don't know what to do. But it's very interesting. I mean, the Heat crowd is not an NBA crowd, and they've got, obviously the best team in the NBA at this point. It's a very strange dynamic going on.
And the one thing I've noticed that I'm glad the Rose Garden doesn't do is give everybody the same color shirt.
Yeah.
The whole blue shirts, or Dallas last year with the same shirts they probably did this year.
Although if we made it into the finals, you might see some of that.
I would not be surprised to do it, but as of right now, I'm happy that they don't.
Well, see, to me, it's a socio-political thing. I don't know if you can get 20,000 Portlanders to put the same shirt on. I think people are going to be cutting them up. They're going to wear them backwards. They're going to put it on their head, inside out. They're not going to want to do it. There's too much identity here, individualism. In Oklahoma City, you put those shirts on, everyone puts them on immediately. And actually in Miami, they had to explain how the shirts work. They made these shirts that said HEAT, and they went on the jumbotron. They're like, guys, what you do
Don't
is
spell hate.
no, it's eat. You got to put the shirts on, and then if you spell them all individually, it will spell the word heat out. And they explained that to the fans. The fans were like on the jumbotron, trying to figure out how to do it. Man, it's embarrassing. I'm not making that up. I could have made that up.
Guys, you got the double H going. Come on. All right. Well, thank you for the little intro there. But let's dive right into it. Let's get into that Blazer stuff. Draft is coming up. We are 8 days away. We're here on Wednesday. It's June 20th. The 28th is the day we're looking at here. You have the fans are always uniquely divided here. Keep the picks, trade the picks. We want veterans. We can turn this around in 1 year.
Blow it up.
Trade LaMarcus. Let's get everything going here. So, from what you can tell, your opinion, what you found, what is the route that they'll go?
It's really, really hard to call this year compared to previous years just because of the Neil O'Shea factor. Yeah. We know Chad Buchanan and Mike Bourne and all their basketball guys so well that going into any given draft, I can almost always tell who their top guys are going to be. And I have an idea of who they might like in this draft, but I don't know how much sway do they have, how much sway does Paul Allen have after the way this season went. Does he want to step in and say, hey guys, you screwed all this up. I've had to bring in all these new executives. Do I want to take over this process? Or is it going to be Neil saying, hey, you gave me this job. You're paying me 7 figures. You quadrupled my salary from the Clippers. It's my team now. Right. So you got this little power struggle here. And I think that's the biggest, thing to watch unfold. I have no idea how it's going to work. I don't think anybody does at this point. I'm not totally sure they know how it's going to unfold. And that's scary. I think a little bit. If you head into the draft process, you want to know the chain of command. I'm not sure we know it right now.
Is it strange that they brought in a new GM, but everybody else that was there making decisions, including Larry Miller, is still there?
Oh yeah, no, keep adding cooks, keep adding guys.
Yeah, it's one of those cases where it's not like, okay, now I'm here, I'm bringing in my own team, much like a coach would do with his assistants. You're like, okay, you're the director of college scouting or whatever it is. I know you used to have this job and you had it for over a year basically. But here it is, and are those guys? Yeah, are those guys like, okay, and this is just what we found out, and they take a step back?
That's what I found to be really interesting. Is it looks like they think they've identified a single point of failure in the GM position without looking at the rest of the boat, right? So
you guys are preaching to the choir on that one. It makes no sense.
Captain or is it the crew?
Yeah, exactly. And I think one thing to keep in mind. Everybody involved, aside from Neil, and everybody really under Neil at this point is ego-free. So guys like Chad, Mike, they're not going to care. They're absolute team players. I mean, both of them are from the Midwest. They're kinds of guys, who would give you the shirt off their back. They'd let you stay at their house for a month and wouldn't even think of charging you rent. I mean, they're just good, solid guys. So they're going to be team players. So you don't have to worry about the personality conflicts. What you do have to worry about is sort of what's the philosophy here. I think what we saw from Neil in his previous drafts is a more high risk approach, a high reward approach, as compared to what these guys might have favored, I guess, over the last couple of years here in Portland. You look at a Luke Babbitt. You know what you're getting with a Luke Babbitt. You're not shooting for a home run with a Luke Babbitt. You're bunting to try to get on base. And Neil O'Shea.
So you're saying we're drafting Andre Drummond here. That's what you're saying.
Well, and I think, look, when I saw the Neil O'Shea hire, that was the first thing that went in my mind is like, oh, if I'm Andre Drummond's agent, I know exactly who my first phone call is going to be because now these guys could be in play for you. And, so I think, the kinds of guys they may have been interested in previously, John Henson, blue chip prospect coming out of high school. He's going to be an NBA player for a long time. Great work ethic, bankable skill in his length, his, shot blocking ability. He's developed his offensive game.
One of Lauren's favorites.
I'm high on this guy. Derek, not so much, but
yeah. So exactly what John Henson brings to the table. I don't have to tell you about him, but that's the kind of guy that they would love. And in fact, I know they love because I saw their draft board 2 years ago when they were, originally kind of like penciling him out maybe when he was going to come out and where they would slot him compared to that class. And they loved him. He was very high on their list. But are those guys in charge? That's the big question. And I think the other big question mark, and I think people have really seized on this pretty well, is does Paul Allen want a point guard? He always wants a point guard. And then can anybody talk him out of using that number 6 pick on a point guard? Because to me, that's not the way you do it. And going back to your question about should they trade or not, first round draft picks are some of the most valuable assets in the NBA. Those, you've got those guys on the subsidized rookie deals. The collective bargaining agreement is so much tighter now. You need to have those guys be productive on your roster, and you want to be able to get them often at positions that are going to become much more expensive down the road. So getting young bigs is one of the smartest things you can do. Utah's shown how smart that is. You just stockpile all these young bigs. You get them out there on the court. They're cheap. and they can be productive for you right off the bat. And so I think if I'm using those picks, I'm trying to get big men. I'm trying to fill out my front court. I'm going to look to address the point guard thing in free agency. If I'm Paul Allen, I might see stars when I watch Damian Lillard, and I might think, hey, this has got to be my guy. I've got to have him. And he has that problem. I mean, it's not a joke. People think it's a caricature. It's dead serious. That's exactly how he is. And, if you're a Blazer fan, maybe you wish somebody could rope him back a little bit.
I don't think that the Blazers are really looking for Damon Stoudemire 2.0 right now.
Well, we can all hope.
Yeah.
But remember, it's not our concept of what the GM should think when he looks at the roster. It's about what Paul Allen does when he's sitting in his room. I want to make a deal. I want to make a deal. I want to make a deal. And thinking, and also we can't underestimate how depressed he was by the season. And most people in town were, right? But Paul Allen, think about how much he spent, like $80 million to pay Brandon Roy to go away to not get to see him play. Then he has to watch the fallout. He has to watch Felton blow everything up. He's got to watch Crawford blow everything up. All his playoff dreams, go kaput. Now he's got to rebuild again. He's saying, maybe I want to sell if we have to rebuild again. I mean, that is a serious emotional process. So he comes out of all of that thinking, hey, and his mom died. So he comes out of all of that thinking, hey, maybe I'll spoil myself. Maybe I'll get myself a point guard. I love point guards. Wow. So you got to be worried. Is he going to do it?
But on the other end, we know he's not afraid to go out there and make a splash. So who's to say that 6th pick they don't keep and use, and he tries to package something else to go grab another pick to get Lillard. It's probably Lillard.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, if it's Marshall, you probably hang it back for that, at least realistically, I think.
I think Marshall's available at 11.
I agree.
I don't know who's going to take him.
Agree.
Okay.
It's not much of a conversation here.
Settled.
End the show. Good night, everybody. All right, so draft, anything could happen. We were looking at trades during that time. They extended Jamal Crawford specifically for that opportunity, shall it arise, which is kind of a win-win. It's a weird scenario where I don't actually remember this ever happening before, where a player had to exercise his option by X date, and he and the team agreed, let's extend it by a 2-week period, solely for the fact that the team, hey, we might be able to trade you, and if you do get traded, that'll give the next team your bird rights, ergo, you might get a larger contract there.
Yeah, no, what's unusual about this situation is the fact that they had a different date in the first place. Normally they have that stock date, and they don't have to go change it and then change it back, and so I think that's kind of what happened.
Yeah. Okay, so draft, basically we've settled on anything can really happen.
Yeah.
There's lots of cooks in the kitchen, and it just kind of depends on who makes the best meal out of there, or who at least seems to have it at that point in time. So the way we've kind of heard it from O'Shea so far is the draft is priority number one. Mm-hmm. Stop asking me all these questions about the coach. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter right now. So what's next on that list? Is it the coach or is it free agency? I mean, free agency starts 2-3 days after the draft, at least when you can start talking to them. Yeah. Do they dive in there? Do they need to get a coach at the same time? Or are they just, we're going to build our roster, we're going to get it 90% set, then we'll go look for the coach that'll help this team build?
They seem to be leaning that direction of let's get our players first and then look for the coach who's going to be able to fit them better. I think that they feel, one, if they are able to make some splashy moves and get some real quality on this roster, they think maybe that's going to be more appealing to some of the coaching names out there. And then two, if they don't and they're very young, they feel like any of the assistant coaches they've been looking at are still going to be available. And I didn't agree with some of the things that he said during his opening press conference, and I didn't take it as negatively as some people did. His backing of Caleb, he kind of caught a lot of crap for that. I didn't have a huge problem with it, but also I tend to agree that they are going to be able to get whoever they want in the middle of July. I mean, there's only one other open job at this point. It's the Orlando Magic. It's a quality job, but if you're in a big race for the Orlando Magic for your coach, I mean, it's not. You've got to have somebody else. If you had just one guy you wanted, you'd get it done right now. And so I don't think that they're in a huge hurry, and I feel like they still think Caleb is a possible backup option. So
there's an idea that runs a little counter to that, though, in that in order to get the guys you want, they need to know who they're going to be playing for, so that they're likely to sign.
Hey, there's nothing about the situations that's ideal. Neil should have been hired last fall. They should never have had Chad go through the entire thing. They should never have had Caleb, who's so young and is completely incapable of talking to the media, be put up as the interim coach, quote unquote. His deal comes up here within a week. He doesn't even know if he's going to have a contract, in July. I mean, there's nothing about the situation that's ideal. If you look around the league at the championship organizations, they don't do business this way. So now that you're stuck here, how do you get out of it? I think is sort of the way to look at it.
Do any of those free agents look at that situation and go, I'm not sure what's happening there. I'm going to stay safe. I'm going to sign maybe for a little less money somewhere else.
For sure. I mean, but what they're looking at really is the money factor. And I think that most free agents realize that, they know that somebody competent is going to be that coach. They don't think that the Blazers are going to come out and totally screw it up, right? So they think, okay, placeholder coach X.
Bowers or
yeah,
like that.
yeah. So placeholder coach X is going to be there. Is the money right? If the money's right, I'll go sign there. I mean, eventually they're going to have to settle for probably 1 or 2 free agents and give the bulk of their cap space to those guys, and they're going to have a mid-level exception. So they're really going to be able to go out and get about 3 guys. Are those guys going to be prohibited? Are they really going to rule themselves out because of coaching situation? It's possible, not totally likely. But a lot of it's theoretical. You got to rely on your relationships that previously established. And a guy like O'Shea can be helpful because he is a talker. He can get in there and he has relationships with agents. He talks like an agent. He's going to be able to sell some guys maybe in a way that Chad Buchanan couldn't previously.
Interesting. All right, so I think we need to take a little short break, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. So we talked a lot about what you think the team's thought processes might be and what the next few weeks are going to look like for them. I want to turn the tables and give you an opportunity to say, if you were making these decisions, who would you be targeting? What would your plan of attack be?
Absolutely. Well, I think flexibility is still crucial here. I think you've got cap space. Cap space is helpful, but you want to be able to maintain that. You don't want to go out there and blow it all in one shot. And teams do that all the time. They get under the cap and they immediately go out and spend all their money. They get way over the cap and all of a sudden they're hamstrung again. And it's just kind of a cycle, and you get stuck sort of in that middle rut of teams where you're, maybe between the 8th best and 12th best in your conference, and you're never able to really jump up. You do have a clock you're working with, which is obviously LaMarcus Aldridge's contract. You've got a couple of years to put together a team to convince him to re-sign. That's right now your major goal. I think when you approach this draft, you want to get 2 quality big men, if you can, because the cupboards are so bare in the front court. It's Aldridge. If he goes down, your season's shot, period. So you need to add some talent, and ideally some talent that's going to be good not only this season, but over the course of multiple seasons. And so if I was going to use both my draft picks, I would probably go that direction. I'd be using them on young big men. Drummond's going to be the best available name at 6 if you don't trade back. You could potentially trade back and maybe get some of these guys, Myers Leonard, Zeller, Henson, who we talked about earlier. I mean, if you can grab 2 of those guys, whoever your 2 favorites are, after you've done the workouts and everything, you're probably going to come out in a better situation than you were, before the draft. In terms of trades and free agency, what you're really going to be looking at, to me, similar to the Andre Miller deal. You brought him in on a very flexible deal, 2-year contract, 3rd-year team option, so you've got some choices there. You didn't overcommit and spend tons of money. And you put yourself in a situation where you could still trade him. He was a very tradable asset at that number. So you're going to be looking for a guy on that kind of a contract. You don't want to go out and give a 4-year deal to somebody necessarily, unless you're absolutely convinced he's the right guy. Of course, I think you've got to re-sign Batum. That's going to be a very high priority for what they do.
There are a lot of people that aren't quite as high on doing that.
So let me hear the counter argument. Are you one?
I'm going to let him do it.
You're the anti-Batum guy. Okay.
I think Batum is a very nice piece to have.
Yeah.
However, I don't think he is a cornerstone player, like a lot of people here think he is, especially when the numbers being thrown out there are $10+ million a year. For 5 years, I guess they can give him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the issue I have coming.
So there's a price ceiling that you're working under.
Exactly.
Okay, I don't think he's going to get above that. I think he's gonna slot right into that same Aaron Aflalo range where you're talking be like 36 to 38 for 4 years.
And I think I'm fine with that.
So
when you're like 42, 44, and I'm like,
They've said
show me something every night, and then I'm fine with it.
No, I think they're on board with that too. I think they would like to see more consistency from him as well. And they have said, hey, there's a price that we're not willing to go past, which in this situation, given how delicate it is and all these other moving parts with the roster getting blown up and Batum kind of making it clear he wants to, hey, I'd love to play for the Spurs and saying all these things, going out there and publicly saying we have a ceiling for him, it's not like a small step. They really are being serious about that. So you got to find the right price. Ultimately, they're going to be able to do that. I think he's going to come back. I think it's kind of a formality. Batum actually kind of let that slide in his exit interview. He said, there's a 99% chance I'm coming back here. And I think that's, we should basically take that for granted at this point. So I think you're going to be looking to address the point guard position and, one more veteran big if you can in free agency. But like I said, you're looking for those short contract years. And to me, I don't think it's as important if they're trying to make the playoffs this following year, 12-13, or even 13-14. It'd be great. It's kind of, a cherry on top if you do it. But really what you're trying to do is you're trying to accumulate assets because so many assets went out the door, whether it was, Bayless or picks or the exchange of the Gerald Wallace and all these things that, losing can be. And really, you've got not a lot to show for it after all those moves. You need to restart, replenishing that if you're going to build a team that actually has a chance to compete. And so I think, to me, I'm looking at a longer scale rebuild. I'm not boxing myself in with contracts. I'm being very, judicious in terms of how I spend my money.
So you don't want the home run swing for like a Darren
Yeah.
Williams, which really
No.
the possibility of that is infinitely small anyway. But
Yeah, you can probably tell from my approach that I've already ruled out any of those kinds of options. I mean, I think the biggest names you're going to be able to acquire, I think this summer are going to be coming via trade. It's going to be a large contract that somebody's trying to get rid of, and you decide, hey, we're going to bite the bullet on this guy. You're not going to convince any of the super A-list free agents because they just don't change markets very often, and they're certainly not going to change markets to a team that's going to be in flux like the Blazers. You may be able to get a mid-range free agent, the Goran Dragic's of the world, those kinds of guys, to commit to you because you're giving them starters minutes and you're paying them like a starter and you're really bowling them over. But a Darren Williams wants everything, he's a superstar. He wants everything, his table set for him. He wants a driver. I mean, he's used to going over, and having, a chauffeur and bodyguards in Turkey when he was there for a couple of years and private planes and all this stuff. And I mean, you're not going to get that in Portland. They don't even have a coach at this point. So, you got to be realistic in terms of what your plans are this summer. I don't expect any home runs this summer.
all right.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Anytime you want to come back, let us know. Otherwise, follow Ben here at blazersedge.com and Dave as well.
Absolutely.
And CBS.
CBSSports.com.
Okay. Thank you very much, and we'll be right back.